On today's Locked On Giants podcast, just how loaded are the New York Giants on the edge? We'll break that down for you in our look at the outside linebackers. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of our written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. And we thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On NFL to get $20 off your first purchase. All right, Giant fans, on today's show, we are continuing our look at the New York Giants position groups as we get you ready and inch closer to the start of training camp. Training camp, about 2 weeks away now. It's going so fast. It's unbelievable, right? So on today's show, we're going to take a look at the outside linebackers, the edge rushers. And there's a lot to like about this group. There are some questions that we're going to cover about this group. And we're also going to address some of the really burning issues later on in the show about the outside linebackers. So again, welcome on into everybody. So glad to have you. Let's go on and get things started, shall we? All right. Let's start off with the edge rushers and the biggest questions here. And one of the questions that I know I had when I was going through the stats and doing some research for the show is that the Giants haven't really had very many double-digit sack holders in the last several years. All right. They had Kayvon Thibodeau, who had 11 and a half sacks back in 2023. He was ranked 12th in the league. Before that, anybody care to guess as to when the Giants last had a guy with double-digit sacks rank in the top 10 league-wide? Anyone? No? All right. You'd have to go back to 2020. Leonard Williams, who also had 11 and a half sacks, finished 7th that year. So you look at the talent upgrade that the Giants have made at the edge, and you say to yourself, somebody's got to definitely be a double-digit sack holder this year, right? You would think so. You also take a look at the talent that they've added, and you would say, okay, maybe, just maybe, one of them are going to finish in the top 10 league-wide, right? Fingers crossed. That's certainly the plan. But I found that kind of interesting because, the pass rush the last several years, very aggressive when Wink Martindale was here, not as aggressive when Shane Bowen came in, but a little bit more effective actually when Shane Bowen came in. So you'd like to see maybe a little bit more production from the pass rush in terms of sacks. Now, look, I get it. Sacks are not the be all end all stat. They are the sexy stat, if you will, the stat that I think a lot of edge rushers aspire to rack up. Defensive coordinators will tell you it's all about disrupting a quarterback, moving him off his mark, creating pressure, forcing early throws and all that stuff. But ultimately, if you can get the sacks and, get some lost yardage and lost downs in the process, that's the goal. And no defensive coordinator is going to ever sit there and say, oh, I'd rather have, 25 quarterback pressures as opposed to 25 quarterback sacks for a season. They're not going to tell you that. So Giants, they need to maybe look to see if they can't get into the top 10. And they've got the talent to do it. They definitely have the talent to do it. It's just a matter of, can they pull it off? All right. The next question that I had for the outside linebacker group, and this is kind of a big one. I don't know if we talk about this a whole lot, but last year, and maybe even the year before, the frequency of the number of one-on-ones that this group actually won. All right. Now, you look at pass rush win rate totals from ESPN. Brian Burns finished 4th in the league in pass rush win rates with a 23% PRWR. He had 59 wins, which total, the raw total was tied for third in the league. Kayvon Thibodeau finished 16th in pass rush win rate with a 17% win rate. And he had 31 wins, which was tied for 20th. I'm sorry, not tied for 20th. It was 20th amongst the top 20 in the raw numbers. So, the one-on-ones is going to be key. And I say that because you look at this pass rush and all the surrounding pieces that they have, the Dexter Lawrences, the Chauncey Golstons, having Abdul Carter in there, having Burns and Thibodeau. There's going to be one-on-one opportunities to be had. All right. There is no way the opposing offense is going to be able to double all those guys. It's just not going to happen. So you would like to see the pass rush win rates maybe be a little higher, maybe see some of these guys who aren't double teamed whole lot, maybe see them win and be a little bit more productive. And I think, especially when you look at Thibodeau, for example, I don't anticipate Thibodeau is going to be doubled a lot. I would be very surprised if he is. I think maybe you'll see Dexter definitely be doubled. I can imagine Burns might see his share of doubles. Maybe even Abdul Carter will see his share of doubles. I don't know that Thibodeau is going to see a whole lot of them. And if he doesn't, he better win those one-on-ones. And again, sacks are the ultimate goal. But if you can get quarterback pressures and disrupt, that's what that's acceptable. So I'm curious to see if the Giants can, win their one-on-ones when they are there to be won. The other question I have, and I don't know if we have the answer to this. I don't think they have this, but the Giants have a lot of guys who are basically penetrators at the outside linebacker spot. They don't really have a true power rusher, in my opinion. So does that change this year? Do they add that element? Does Carter bring it? Does maybe a healthy Burns bring that? I don't know the answer to that, but you'd like to ideally have a power rusher in there. I mean, it just to change things up a little bit. And, can they get by without one? Yeah, they can. But it would be nice to kind of have a power rusher. It's kind of like, with the running backs, having a finesse running back and a power back, just kind of allows you to mix things up a little bit. And I don't know that the Giants have guys who can consistently win with power on the edge. Maybe Chauncey Golston, can that be that guy? Chauncey Golston, I'm going to mention him a lot, even though he's a defensive lineman, he's going to play defensive end probably for the Giants. He is kind of part of that edge group. So, maybe he's the guy that gives them the power. Okay, so coming up next, I'm going to break down the individuals, the key individuals. And again, basically, we've got Burns, Thibodeau, Carter, and I'm going to mention Golston. So I'm going to break down some statistics of that group right after this. Hey, Giant fans, have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to the first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets. So go on and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we are continuing our look at the remaining Giants position groups. All right, we've been doing one per day. We still have inside linebackers to look at. We've got safeties, we've got cornerbacks, and I'll see if, I have enough material to do special teams. I don't know if I will, because that's kind of like a wild card, but definitely we've got to finish up the team as we get closer to the start of training camp. So we are kind of still on a summer schedule this week, and that we'll have a show today, obviously Monday. We'll probably do one on Wednesday, and we might do another one either Thursday or Friday, but we're going to do 3, it looks like, this week. And then next week, we're going to go back to our 5-day a week, 5-show a week schedule. So that's what's coming up on the Locked On Giants podcast. All right, let's get back to the look at the edge rushers. All right, let's break down each individual. And we will start with Brian Burns. Now, is there anybody out there who's going to say that the Giants didn't get their money's worth from Brian Burns last year? He was something else. Okay. Brian Burns came as advertised. He's a penetrator, used speed to penetrate. He logged his 5th straight season with at least 8 sacks. He finished last year with 8.5 sacks. He had 66 quarterback pressures, one shy of his career high of 67, which I believe was set the year prior with the Panthers. He is about speed and burst. And the incredible thing about Brian Burns is he did all this despite being really banged up. I mean, I sit here, and when I think about what Brian Burns was able to accomplish, knowing how banged up he was and how he just had the sheer will to fight through what he was dealing with, that just made him all the more, valuable to the team, and just, you couldn't help but respect the man because he was out there. He didn't want to come out. He played every single defensive snap. I mean, I don't know how he did it. I still don't, but I tip my hat to him. Now, an area where the Giants outside linebackers weren't very good at last year were with hustle stops. Burns had 2. All right. That's not a whole lot. So you'd like to see maybe a little bit more of that in the game when the opportunity is there. Kayvon Thibodeau, who I'm going to get to in a moment, he didn't have any. All right. This is per NFL Pro, by the way. So, but Burns, hands down, was the best outside linebacker the Giants had last year. And I'm not just saying that because he played every snap. It's just true. His production was there. And it didn't matter really, what the situation was. Like, I found an interesting stat on NFL Pro. And basically is, where did the sacks come in terms of where the Giants were in the game? In other words, were the individuals able to get more sacks when the Giants were leading, when the game was tied, or when they were behind, and maybe the opposing offense was taking its foot off the gas pedal? Burns' distribution was basically even across the board. So he had 2 of his sacks when they were leading, 2.5 sacks when they were trailing, and 4 when the game was dead even. So he was kind of consistent across the board. And also, Burns was kind of consistent in terms of his pressures, despite who they were facing. In other words, whether it was a good offensive line or a questionable offensive line, Burns was consistent across the board. So hands down, the best edge rusher they had. All right, let's talk about Kayvon Thibodeau now. Thibodeau, the problem with his game, and I want to stress that he wasn't horrible last year. You've got to acknowledge that he had the wrist issue, which cost him 5 games. And so his production, maybe his numbers weren't as good as they were the year prior when he was healthy for all the games. Thibodeau's issue, as I see it, is that he played more of a reactionary type game as opposed to being more proactive. So I'd like to see him maybe attack a little bit more as opposed to just react to what's coming at him. And, I know a lot of you have said to me, oh, Thibodeau, he was great against the weaker opponents, but not so much against the better offensive tackles and linemen that he faced. You'd like to see a little bit more consistency there. Absolutely. Whether it's he's going up against a rookie or an all-pro, the consistency wasn't quite there. I do think he has it in him, though. I mean, how much that injury was a factor, I don't know. But this is a big year for Kayvon Thibodeau. And I think, if he can be consistent, he can be, one of the top producers of that outside linebacker group. Now, again, like I said before, Thibodeau is probably going to see a lot of one-on-ones. So he's going to have to beat a lot of those one-on-ones. And if he can do that on a consistent basis, you will know then that he has turned the corner and is on his way to becoming more of an upper echelon edge rusher in the NFL. In terms of the sack distribution for Thibodeau, 3.5 of his 5.5 sacks came when the Giants were trailing. All right. So I don't know. I mean, you'd like to see more of the sacks come when the game is tied or when the Giants are leading. So, that's a stat that I think you'd like to see maybe improve in the coming year. So we'll see how he does. I mean, Thibodeau, for all intents and purposes, he's kind of in a contract year, even though the Giants picked up his 5th-year option. If he has a solid year, makes the Pro Bowl, he'll get that extension early. The Giants won't let him go into next year, without an extension, because that's kind of how Joe Schoen has kind of worked it. If a guy comes on strong and shows upward progression, he gets an extension before he gets to that option year if he's a first-round pick. Okay, let's talk about Abdul Carter now, the rookie. I am so excited to see what this young man can do. He's got a first step that is so lightning fast. It reminds me a lot of O.C. Umenyiора's first step. All right, back in the day, O.C. played at defensive end, but he had a knack for timing that first step off the ball. And before you know it, boom, he was in the backfield disrupting. This is what I think we're going to see a lot of with Abdul Carter. I think Abdul Carter is going to probably see a lot of chips from tight ends and running backs. They're going to try and slow him down because he's that fast. All right. So I'm really excited about that. Abdul Carter last year in college at Penn State, first year really playing a lot, at outside linebacker, finished 5th in the nation with 12 sacks, which was a career high. He had 52 pressures, a 92.4 pass rush grade, according to Pro Football Focus. I am so psyched to see what this kid could do. And, the beauty of Abdul Carter is the versatility. A big question, which, we're kind of going to get to in a little bit, is how they're going to use him. Well, the versatility is going to allow them to do quite a number of different packages. And we kind of saw some of those in the spring, which I'll talk about in the next segment. Okay, I'm going to mention Chauncey Golston with this group, even though Chauncey Golston is probably more of a defensive lineman, should have been in the D lineman group. Last year, Golston, he had a career high 5.5 sacks, which was a 1.3% sack rate, a quick get off, and quick to pressure, just kind of stacking it up against what the Giants had last year. Golston would have finished second in get off as well as time to pressure. So Golston is a guy, I'm not sure how they're going to get all these guys on the field, but look, if Shane Bowen is going to earn his money, he'll figure it out. And I'll tell you what, if they could come up with like a NASCAR package or a 4 Aces package or something like that, it's going to be quite the sight to see. So we'll see how Bowen, what he comes up with. I mean, they experimented with some things in the spring, weren't able to get everybody out on the field because some guys were nursing a few things here and there, but this is a very, very talented edge rushing group. And it should be the bread and butter of the defense. No question about it. All right. Coming up next, just a few remaining questions about where they go from here. So we'll have that for you right after this. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. We are looking at the edge rushers. We are on the edge. And really, as far as the questions moving forward, the biggest one is, how are they going to get everybody on the field at once? Shane Bowen's going to earn his money this year, trust me, because it's tough. You might see some packages where Abdul Carter is an inside linebacker, maybe the nickel backer. You might see some packages where they just put everybody up in like a kind of like an amoeba type defense where you don't know who's going to rush, who's going to drop into coverage. There are things they could do. There's ways they could be creative. And, we saw some of the ways, like, for example, we saw Abdul Carter used as an inside linebacker. We saw him line up as a defensive end. But basically, I know when we spoke to Shane Bowen in the spring, he said our first objective with Abdul Carter is, to teach him to be an outside linebacker at this level. He's a fast learner, the kid. All business. I think he's going to pick it up pretty quickly. The other huge burning question, and quite honestly, I don't think this is as big of a deal as some people seem to make it, is that will the Giants move Kayvon Thibodeaux in a trade if Abdul Carter comes on strong? And I'm going to say no to that and here's why I'm going to say that. Besides the fact that you can never have too many pass rushers, those of you who are everydayers or who read me over on Giants on SI, how many times have I said that the Giants just didn't have enough pass rushers in the past, that they were lacking in that group? Like they would have maybe two good ones or maybe one good one even. And then if an injury struck, they were left with basically, trying to figure out how to plug that hole. The good defenses in the NFL have at least three solid pass rushers. The Giants, in my estimation, have four. And I'm not even counting Dexter Lawrence in the group because Dexter Lawrence, defensive line. I mean, I probably should count him in the group if I'm considering, Chauncey Golston in that group. So, the Giants have a lot of pass rushers now. If there is an injury, they should not have a drop off. It shouldn't be catastrophic to where now all of a sudden the pass rush potential drops. So they've got enough. And that's why I say they shouldn't get rid of Thibodeaux just yet. Thibodeaux is still young, and I get it. He hasn't exactly set the world on fire. I get it. But that being said, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. He was banged up last year, right? Missed 5 games. What might his numbers have been if he had played those 5 games? Would he have been better? Would he have, teamed up with Burns and done even more damage? I mean, towards the last, when he returned, he and Burns, I think, were ranked 4th in terms of pass rushing duos, in terms of generating pressure. All right, I think they were ranked 4th. So they, as a tandem, were pretty good. I don't know that you want to break up that band. Now, I get it. People are going to say, well, you took Abdul Carter 3rd overall. You want to get him on the field. And the only way you're going to do it and get him on the field every down is if you get rid of one of the two. And you're not getting rid of Burns because of the contract. So Thibodeaux makes the most sense. You trade him, you get a high draft pick or a day 2 pick maybe, and you call it a day. I don't think the Giants will do that right away. Could I see that happening maybe down the line? I think it would depend on how the season goes, to be honest with you. If the season goes down the tubes, maybe they look to move guys. But, I think, at this point, if we're saying that we need to see more from Thibodeaux, wouldn't you want him to at least play at least half the season right up until the trade deadline and show that maybe his market value is going to increase a little bit, that maybe he becomes more attractive to where, let's say for argument's sake, he has, 6 sacks by the time the trade deadline approaches. And then you can go to a team, if you're willing to, trade him, you could say, oh, he's got 6 sacks. He's on pace to do double digits this year. Now maybe you get a little better draft pick in return if you want to move him. But really, they don't need to. They really don't, because Thibodeaux doesn't cost them that much against the cap this year. Next year, he's not going to cost them that much. I think his cap hit is going to be about $14 million. If you think about it, the top pass rushers cost upwards of $20 million against their team's caps. So if you can get Thibodeaux on the right path, getting him, back to being the player you think he can be, why would you give up on him? So it just doesn't make sense. And again, you figure out a way to use all your pass rushers. The Giants have done it before. They did it when they had Strahan and Umanura and Tuck. They figured it out when they had Tuck, Umanura, and JPP. It's, they can come up with a way. So, yeah, I would not advocate trading away Kayvon Thibodeaux right now. And I know there are analysts who say they should strike while the iron's hot before the guy has a chance to get banged up or whatever. No, I disagree. So, all right, Giant fans, that will do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. I want to thank you for spending time with me today here on Locked On Giants. For your next listen, please check out the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. Training camps are right around the corner, and hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason as they break down the moves around the league and the biggest storylines as we head towards training camp. Find Locked On Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, I will see you later this week with another look at the Giants' defensive units. We'll probably take a look at inside linebacker on our next show. So until then, have a good one, everybody.